Mark Carney just pulled off something that could reshape the entire US-Canada trade relationship. And it all started with a phone call Donald Trump didn't want anyone to know about. While the world watched Trump's tariff war escalate to dangerous new levels, Canada's Prime Minister was quietly working behind the scenes to turn the tables on America's most unpredictable president. The call that changed everything happened on Monday evening.
That's what we're doing. I last spoke, exchanged messages. I last spoke to the president Monday evening. We spoke at length on a wide range of issues, including on trade, but geopolitical, other issues, labor issues, etc. It was a good conversation. We have a team, a very senior team. The clerk of the Privy Council is there in Washington as we speak, that is meeting with the U.S. counterparts. Don't expect immediate white smoke on one of these strategic sectors, but that's the type of conversation that we're having and will continue to have.
Carney described it as a lengthy and constructive conversation covering trade, geopolitical issues, and labor matters. Neither the Prime Minister's office nor the White House issued any public statement about it afterward. But the results of that conversation are now sending shockwaves through Washington, with Canadian officials heading to the U.S. Capitol for urgent negotiations that could determine the future of North America's economic relationship. To understand why this matters so much, we need to look at how we got here and why Trump's tariff strategy might have just blown up in his face. The trade war between the U.S. and Canada has been escalating since Trump returned to the White House in January. What started as threats and bluster quickly turned into real economic warfare when Trump imposed punishing tariffs on Canadian goods. On August 1st, he raised tariffs on Canada to 35% from 25%, targeting everything from steel and aluminum to automobiles, industries that form the backbone of Canada's economy. But here's what makes Canada uniquely vulnerable. Decades of integration have made these sectors almost entirely dependent on the American market. More than 90% of Canada's iron, steel, and aluminum exports are U.S.-bound. When Trump slapped 50% tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum, he essentially held a gun to the head of entire Canadian industries. Trump's justification was always the same. Canada wasn't doing enough to stop fentanyl from crossing the border, and Canadian retaliation against his tariffs proved they were acting in bad faith. His administration painted this as a matter of national security, using the drug crisis to justify what was essentially economic warfare against America's closest ally. Canada initially fought back with 25% counter tariffs on American metals, but by August, something changed. Carney began removing some of Canada's retaliatory measures, a move that critics called capitulation, but that may have been something far more strategic. This is where Carney's approach gets interesting. While Trump was playing the role of the aggressive dealmaker, threatening to make Canada the 51st state and claiming America didn't need anything Canada had to offer, Carney was playing a different game entirely. He defended Canada's competitive position by pointing out something Trump's team didn't want to admit. Even with all the tariff threats and economic warfare, Canada still maintained what Carney called the best trade deal of any country in the world.
The U.S. president.
Okay, well, let's go to results. Right now, we have the best trade deal of any country in the world. Okay, those are results. We think it can be better, and we're working to make it better. But to be absolutely clear, 85% of our trade with the United States is tariff-free. Nobody else is in that position. Our average tariff is about 5.5%. That's the lowest average tariff of any country in the world. So right now we have the best, but we have real issues. Without question, we have real issues in steel, in aluminum, in forest products, in autos, potentially in pharma, copper, some other sectors. So there's these strategic sectors that the U.S. has focused on where we have issues. And as well, there will be a review of CUSMA, our trade agreement with the U.S. and Mexico, starting next year. So we need to prepare for that. We need to lay the groundwork for that review, and we need to address as rapidly as possible these strategic sectors. Okay, so that's the overall context. So we're looking now, given that we've got the best deal, to really focus in on those strategic sectors and prepare the groundwork for that broader discussion on CUSMA.
The numbers tell a remarkable story. Despite the headlines about escalating trade tensions, 85% of U.S.-Canada trade remains tariff-free. Canada enjoys the lowest average tariff of any country at about 5.5%. How is this possible? Because Trump kept in place an exception for products traded under the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. This means that while Trump was making headlines with his tariff threats, the vast majority of Canada-US trade continued to flow freely. Carney had effectively called Trump's bluff, showing that the tariff war was more theater than substance. But real issues remain in strategic sectors: steel, aluminum, forest products, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and copper all face significant challenges that need addressing. These aren't just statistics on a trade balance sheet. They represent thousands of jobs and entire communities on both sides of the border. The Monday phone call signaled a shift in approach. Carney told reporters that Canada and the United States are now in active negotiations to resolve issues in the tariff-affected sectors. More importantly, he said Canada is expecting agreements in some of the strategic sectors, the very industries Trump had been using as leverage. The fact that neither side announced this call publicly tells us everything we need to know about what's really happening. Trump, who never misses an opportunity to claim victory or attack his opponents, stayed silent. Carney, meanwhile, was careful to manage expectations, warning that people shouldn't expect immediate white smoke on one of these strategic sectors. This suggests that serious negotiations are underway, negotiations that could fundamentally reshape the relationship. Carney has now sent Michael Sabia, Canada's top civil servant, to Washington for meetings with American counterparts. This isn't just diplomatic courtesy. This is the kind of high-level engagement that happens when real deals are being negotiated. The timing couldn't be more significant. Trump's entire tariff strategy now hangs in the balance.
The president is preparing to defend his global tariff regime before the Supreme Court.
Because without the tariffs, this country is in serious trouble.
Trump standing by his trade tactics comes as one cabinet minister asserted today that despite dropping retaliatory tariffs, Prime Minister Mark Carney hasn't put his elbows down.
There's no capitulation. Let's be clear. Zero. Never. That's not happening. We're trying to match exactly what the Americans have done.
A U.S. federal appeals court recently created massive uncertainty around his tariff regime, and Trump is preparing to defend his approach before the Supreme Court. He insists that without the tariffs, the country is in serious trouble. But Canadian officials maintain they haven't capitulated, asserting that there's zero capitulation and that they're matching exactly what the Americans have done. The legal cloud hanging over Trump's tariffs gives Canada additional leverage. If the Supreme Court ultimately rules against Trump's tariff powers, his entire trade strategy could collapse. The administration has until the 14th to appeal, but the uncertainty is already affecting negotiations. Meanwhile, the economic reality on the ground is starting to work in Canada's favor. Canadian steel mills are suffering from the tariffs, but so are U.S. car makers. After protests from Detroit executives, Trump has already granted some tariff exemptions, particularly for auto parts made in North America. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer told Trump directly that his policies are harming her state's flagship industry. This is the contradiction at the heart of Trump's trade strategy. The integrated nature of the North American economy means that tariffs designed to hurt Canada end up hurting American businesses and workers too. Auto plants in Michigan need Canadian steel. American manufacturers depend on Canadian aluminum. The supply chains built over decades of free trade can't be easily replaced. Those close to the Prime Minister see this as a positive development.
Probably I wasn't on the other line listening in like I used to do with my sisters back in the day, though I wish I were. But what I can tell you is a couple of things. First, I'm told by people behind the scenes that the fact that these conversations are happening is a good sign, right? They didn't for a while after that August 1st deadline came and went. And now we've seen two conversations basically within a week. So the fact that they're talking is perceived by people in and around the Prime Minister to be a good thing. Whether that translates into a good thing for Canadians is a whole other story. I take note of the Prime Minister's comments that the bulk of their discussion, I'm paraphrasing, but the bulk of their discussion focuses now on the sectoral tariffs. That is where, as cheesy as the saying is, the proof will be in the pudding, right? If, in essence, the Prime Minister is able to negotiate lower sectoral tariffs for Canadian goods, steel, aluminum, and copper, and in the auto sector, well, that will be the win that they are looking for. But the Trump administration has shown no signs of abating on those very, very punishing tariffs, and so we remain in a holding pattern. I garner from what the Prime Minister said that is where the focus of the conversations is right now. The
fact that conversations between Carney and Trump are happening again after a period of silence suggests progress is being made. The discussions are focusing primarily on sectoral tariffs, with potential wins in reducing tariffs for Canadian goods, like steel, aluminum, copper, and auto sector products. Though the Trump administration shows no immediate signs of backing down completely, the resumption of dialogue itself represents a significant breakthrough. Carney's cabinet is now convening to address these critical challenges. Top pollsters are briefing ministers to understand public sentiment around Trump and other issues. The government is preparing for two main areas of focus: managing the U.S. trade situation and its economic impacts, including major projects and budget planning, and addressing domestic issues like crime and immigration that matter to Canadians. The broader geopolitical context makes this even more important. Canada isn't just dealing with Trump's trade war, they're also managing trade frictions with China, their second largest trading partner. China has imposed punishing tariffs on Canadian agricultural products like canola and pork after Canada placed levies on Chinese electric vehicles, steel, and aluminum. This puts Canada in the difficult position of managing relationships with two economic superpowers simultaneously. But this challenge may actually be working in Canada's favor. By demonstrating that they're willing to stand up to China on trade issues, something Trump has long demanded of allies, Canada has strengthened its position in negotiations with the U.S. Carney can argue that Canada is a reliable partner in the broader economic competition with China. The secret to Carney's strategy may be his background as a former central banker. Unlike traditional politicians who often react emotionally to Trump's provocations, Carney approaches these negotiations with the cool calculation of someone who understands global financial markets. He knows that economic relationships are ultimately about mutual benefit, not zero-sum competition. This is evident in how he's framed Canada's position. Rather than getting drawn into Trump's rhetoric about unfair trade or Canadian exploitation of the U.S., Carney consistently emphasizes Canada's value as America's largest customer. He points out that Canada provides the U.S. with critical resources, energy, raw materials, food, that America needs to maintain its economic dominance. The upcoming review of CUSMA starting next year adds another layer of urgency to these negotiations. Both countries need to prepare for this comprehensive review, and neither can afford to let the current trade tensions poison those discussions. The Canada-US-Mexico Agreement represents the foundation of North American economic integration, and its future depends on resolving current disputes. For Trump, a deal with Canada would allow him to claim victory in east one of his trade wars while removing a source of economic uncertainty for American businesses. For Carney, it would eliminate the threat to key Canadian industries while demonstrating that his approach of patient negotiation can succeed where confrontation has failed. The broader implications extend far beyond North America. If Carney succeeds in negotiating a resolution to this trade dispute, it will demonstrate that there are alternatives to Trump's aggressive trade tactics. Other countries watching this relationship closely will see that it's possible to maintain sovereignty and dignity while still finding ways to work with the Trump administration. But success is far from guaranteed. Trump's unpredictability remains a constant threat to any negotiated agreement. His tendency to change his mind, often based on the last person he spoke to or the latest cable news segment he watched, means that even a solid agreement could be undermined at any moment. Moreover, the political pressures on both sides remain intense. In Canada, Conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has criticized Carney's approach as capitulation, demanding that Canada accept nothing less than zero tariffs on all products. In the U.S., Trump faces pressure from his base to maintain his tough stance on trade, even when it hurts American interests. The next few weeks will be crucial. If Sabia's meetings in Washington produce concrete progress, it could set the stage for a broader resolution of the trade dispute. If negotiations stall or Trump decides to escalate further, the entire relationship could spiral into a more damaging trade war. What's clear is that Carney's strategy of patient negotiation combined with strategic concessions has put Canada in a stronger position than many observers expected. By refusing to be drawn into Trump's theatrical approach to diplomacy while quietly working to find practical solutions, Carney may have found a way to turn Trump's own tactics against him. The secret phone call that started this latest phase of negotiations represents more than just diplomatic outreach. It's a sign that even in an era of Twitter diplomacy and public confrontation, serious international relationships still require the kind of behind-the-scenes work that Carney has been doing. Whether this approach ultimately succeeds will depend on Trump's willingness to prioritize economic reality over political theater. But for now, Canada appears to have seized the initiative in a relationship that many thought Trump completely controlled. And that might just be the most important development in North American trade relations since the original NAFTA agreement was signed.